Good morning. I'm Gary DeWaal, and this is Bridging the Week from March 2nd to 6th, and today is March 9th, 2020. Last week, international regulators began issuing guidance and/or relief to impacted firms in response to the spread of COVID-19. The impact of this coronavirus has already begun materially to affect operations and behaviors in the financial services industry. Separately, the former Chief Operational Risk Officer and Chief Compliance Officer of a U.S. national bank was sanctioned $450,000 by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network for his role in the bank's over 5-year capping of suspicious activity alerts generated by the firm's monitoring system in order to accommodate a too low number of anti-money laundering surveillance staff. I will not be in Boca Raton, Florida this week, as planned, attending the FIA's annual International Futures Industry Conference because of its cancellation as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. Having worked through the anthrax scare at NBC's world headquarters, which impacted the adjacent building of my workplace in New York City in 2001, and the 2003 SARS outbreak, mostly in Asia, it seems to me that this episode will be more pernicious and widespread. So I may help others, as well as myself, take precautions to mitigate any adverse outcomes. Let's get started. Last week, multiple regulators issued informational guidance and/or specific regulatory relief in connection to the COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak. Additionally, the FIA canceled its annual International Futures Industry Conference scheduled for March 10th to 12th in Boca Raton, Florida, while SIFMA canceled its 2020 Law and Compliance Conference planned for March 15 to 18 in Orlando, Florida. Many financial service industry firms have begun separating employees and imposing restrictions or bans on non-essential travel and group meetings. In a notice to members dated March 4th, the National Futures Association acknowledged its understanding that members are developing contingency plans to deal with the impact of COVID-19, may have quote-unquote specific concerns regarding their ability to comply fully with all Commodity Futures Trading Commission and NFA requirements, particularly if some or all of their staff are unable to work from their offices or the firm's backup locations. According to NFA, quote, NFA and CFTC staff intend to take a practical approach that will give members appropriate flexibility in implementing contingency plans needed to continue to conduct business, end of quote, if regulatory relief is required. Separately, the UK Financial Conduct Authority restated its expectation that all firms have contingency plans dealing with major events and indicate it is currently reviewing, along with the Bank of England, quote, the contingency plans of a wide range of firms, end of quote. FCA indicated it expects that firms are taking, quote, all reasonable steps, end of quote, to ensure they meet their regulatory obligations, including, for example, the capability to enter orders and transactions into appropriate systems, record conversations when trading, and provide staff compliance support when required. Although neither the SEC nor the Commodity Futures Trading Commission have issued any written guidance for brokerage firm registrants, the SEC provided conditional regulatory relief for certain publicly traded companies filing obligations. The SEC's Division of Investment Management separately also indicated it would recommend no enforcement action against an investment fund board that did not comply with certain in-person voting requirements from March 4th to at least June 15, 2020, in case of, quote, unforeseen or emergency circumstances affecting some or all of the directors, end of quote. The spread of the COVID-19 virus worldwide will continue to create unusual challenges for all businesses because of the difficulty of detecting carriers and there currently being no vaccine. As a result, the most important measure companies and individuals can take during the current crisis is to be informed by facts. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention maintains a robust website of relevant information, including frequently asked questions and answers, and persons may subscribe to automatic updates. I have links to important parts of the CDC website, as well as the sign-up for email notices on the article version of Bridging the Week at www.bridgingtheweek.com. I also have a number of hopefully helpful tips on reviewing business conduct plans and employment law issues that might be considered when planning for COVID-19. Check out the article version of Bridging the Week on the website. And finally, Michael LaFontaine, the former Chief Operational Risk Officer and Chief Compliance Officer of U.S. Bank National Association, was fined $450,000 by FinCEN for his role in the bank's capping of suspicious activity alerts generated by the bank's monitoring system from January 2005 through May 2015. In February 2018, 4 federal regulators imposed out-of-pocket sanctions on U.S. Bancorp, totaling $613 million for alleged non-compliance with its anti-money laundering obligations from 2011 to 2015. The regulators were the U.S. Department of Justice, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and FinCEN. The regulators claimed that, during the relevant time, the bank failed to maintain an adequate staff level to conduct anti-money laundering oversight and to accommodate the inadequately sized staff, capped the number of alerts generated by its AML surveillance system. This, alleged the regulators, caused the bank not to identify many potential AML issues and not to make many required suspicious activity reports. FinCEN claimed in its current enforcement action that Mr. LaFontaine failed, quote, to take sufficient steps to ensure that the bank's compliance division was appropriately staffed to meet regulatory expectations, end of quote. Moreover, charged FinCEN, 2 AML officers expressed concerns to Mr. LaFontaine that the bank's surveillance system, as used by the bank, was, quote-unquote, inadequate because caps were imposed to limit alerts. Although FinCEN acknowledged that Mr. LaFontaine sought and received funding to upgrade the firm's AML system, it said these actions, quote, were inadequate to correct the deficiencies, end of quote. Well, that's it for this week's edition of Bridging the Week. As always, there's more information in each article and more articles on the article version of Bridging the Week on the website. Check it out. I'm Gary DeWaal. Have a nice week. And until the next edition of Bridging the Week, be careful out there and ciao.